Hello and welcome to episode number 21 of Performing Labor, and the first episode of 2021. My name is Rob Simons, and I am your host. This podcast features interviews with accomplished performing musicians who are doing interesting and creative work from within performing arts institutions and outside of them. We'll unpack their training, their practice, and their careers, how they got started, how they stay sharp, and their ambitions for the future. It's my hope that these interviews will provide value no matter where you are on your musical journey. If you're thinking about a career in music, if you're in music school now, a working musician, or if you're a music lover and just curious to learn more. My guest this week is Alanna Tonetti-Tieppo, sub-principal second violin of the Royal Northern Sinfonia, a chamber orchestra in Gateshead, England. As you'll hear at the top of this conversation, Alanna's first violin teacher was my grandmother, Olga Hamilton, back in Attleboro, Massachusetts. And other than a few times over the past few decades, I haven't seen or spoken to Alanna, really since she was a little girl. But my grandmother kept me appraised of her progress as a student and then as a professional, always brimming with pride at her many accomplishments. The school that my grandparents ran for 50 plus years, and that Alanna and I both attended, was a highly charged academic environment that included music as a mandatory subject. The outward rationale for that inclusion was that music was one of the liberal arts. The instrument teaches individual discipline, and playing it with others teaches cooperation. There was no more tolerance for giving up on the violin than there was for giving up on history or algebra. It was supposed to be hard. Being a student was your job, and part of the job was playing an instrument. And I'm sure all that was true. But I think those things were built on something more fundamental, something more simple. My grandmother was the daughter of Italian immigrants, and she and her two sisters all studied music at a high level. There was a cellist, a harpist/singer, and of course, a violinist. And in an America of less surplus, and a household of limited resources, the only barrier to making music, and making music well, was effort. And I think that held true for the generations of students that she taught over her career. Effort was no guarantee of excellence, or even affection, but she was convinced that music was something everyone should have access to. And access might kindle into interest, and if that interest catches fire beyond that, beyond the level of your classmates, then it, like any other subject, should be accelerated and nurtured. And for Alanna, that was going on to study at the Walnut Hill School for the Performing Arts in Natick, Massachusetts. She left Massachusetts for college in London and earned degrees at the Royal Academy of Music and the Royal College of Music. As a student, she joined the Jubilee String Quartet, which won numerous competitions and awards in Europe. And I've put a link to a beautiful performance of theirs in the show notes. The rigors and camaraderie of a serious string quartet were formative parts of her development that she's carried into what sounds like a perfect professional match at the Royal Northern Sinfonia. Alanna combines a great passion for the music and the instrument with an intense work ethic and with sincere humility. And listening to her talk about her path and being anchored by that early belief that there is a place for everyone in music, I felt those ingredients added up to a refreshing optimism about the profession. Obviously, there is no shortage of work ethic and tenacity in this business. But I think the intensity of the competition can drive many of us to a state of defensive pessimism, where we chronically aim low and at the targets we're fairly sure we can hit. But someone who crosses an ocean for school, pursues chamber music at the highest level, and wins a job in the one full-time chamber orchestra in their adopted home has an undergirding optimism. There's a belief in possibility, the possibility of achieving excellence and something special. And it's something that's repeatedly come up in the conversations that I've had on this program with chamber musicians. There's an excellent book published by the Brookings Institute that deals with institutional dynamics entitled Agents of Change. But it also has many implications for the individual. The authors write about how strategy is rarely written out and is an implicit, tacit understanding of how you will square up to a challenge. They go on to write, seeing the landscape is one thing, navigating it is another. To get from point A to point B, you need more than a plan. You need actual forward movement. Moving requires not only an understanding of the environment and the road ahead, but also skillful maneuvering around the many potholes and detours. This is the essential difference between tactics and strategy. Tactics refer to particularly well-chosen actions taken in the heat of the moment. Strategies are ideas that orchestrate these actions. What I found so inspiring and interesting in Alanna's story, especially given how early in her career this is that at the many junctures along the way, she's had the intrinsic motivation to square up to the challenges of the profession, the evaluations, the auditions, the competitions, and not letting them crowd out the important things, navigating them without getting lost in the weeds or losing sight of why she's pursuing it. Please enjoy this conversation with Alanna Tonetti-Tieppo. Alanna Tonetti-Tieppo, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So we have a common musical forebearer in that my grandmother, Olga Hamilton, was your first violin teacher and a formative figure in your life as well. And the school that my grandparents ran made music a mandatory and daily part of the curriculum. And so obviously that had an important influence on both of us. But when I reflect on my own career and as I talk to people, peers in the business, it always seems like there's like a constellation of events and circumstances that leads people on this professional journey. And I'm curious, as you reflect on your own, what were some of the early experiences that hooked you and gave you the dedication to continue down this road?
Obviously, the greatest influences that I've had in becoming a professional musician and wanting to become a professional musician would definitely be down to the teachers I had. Mrs. Hamilton, your grandmother, was my first violin teacher, and she really gave me that love for music. I think that's obviously the core of what we do, and she definitely instilled that in me, as well as all the good things like discipline and all the wonderful things that you get from having music lessons as a child. But definitely that initial love for music came from Hamilton Country Day. As I moved into high school, I went to Magdalena Richter at the Walnut Hills School in Natick, and she was just so supportive. And as an adolescent, you're going through all sorts of things, and at that point, I had decided I wanted to be a violinist as a profession, and she really supported that dream. And even if it took me sort of 3 times longer to get something than someone else, she always told me that was absolutely fine. And, it's nobody's business how long it takes you to do something, and everything sort of evens out in the end. And there's a place for everyone in music, which was really sort of comforting, because in such a sort of competitive world, it can be difficult to see where you're going to find your place. And she really, really helped me do that.
That's really interesting. So when you think back early and you talk about this love of music, was it through making music with other people that hooked you, or was it just was it the individual experience of it?
Oh, totally. It was making music with other people. That was it for me. Actually, when Mrs. Hamilton suggested that I join, what was then GYPSO, which is now BYSO, I joined the preparatory orchestra, and that was my first experience playing with other violins and violas and cellos and double bass. It was a preparatory string orchestra. It just made me so excited. It was that sort of electricity that, we all still feel when we're on stage. It was the first time that I'd felt that. And that excitement of making music with other people, hearing other voices, other lines, and how they work together. It was just so exciting. I think I was 12 when I joined there. And that was it for me. I was like, this is what I want to do.
When I reflect, because I was a member of the same institution quite a while before you, but yeah, I think the community that's built in youth orchestra is really special. Do you think, as you look back, though, do you see yourself as being, in retrospect, that your desire to play this music well was maybe greater than those around you, or do you think it was a part of like a greater continuum?
At least at school, at Hamilton Country Day School, all of my classmates were extremely intelligent. I honestly don't know what I was doing there, but everyone else was so academically gifted, and we all had our subjects that we were best at, and we were all quite competitive as I remember it. So I think that encouragement that I got in music lessons really made me work harder at it, because I seemed to be maybe a bit better. I don't know, but I sort of took to it. And so that became my sort of identity amongst my friends at school as well. I was the one who was good at music. And we all sort of, like I said, had our fortes. And because I think that sense of identity motivated me to sort of work even harder. And also the encouragement I got at the school. I remember if Mr. Hamilton was called in from his classroom to come and hear you play something, that was high praise.
Well, I had a similar experience, Alanna. It's funny to hear you say that. It's a little comforting to hear you say that, actually, and that, you know, that so much of your identity, if you're around really bright people for whom really complicated things seem to come more easily, to have something like music where you are demonstrably a faster mover than your peers. It is a reinforcing feedback mechanism that I felt as well, but also a genuine interest in music and music broadly. And for, like I said, the youth orchestra was hugely important. What do you think is at the heart of that as a kid? Like, it's obviously, maybe there's a kinesthetic talent that maybe some instrumentalists have, but I often think it's just like, maybe it's an issue of like having good taste, like really responding to music. You know what I mean? Like, 'cause, you know, especially with string playing at a young age, it's such a difficult way to make a sound, to make a beautiful sound. And I think that having a sense of what that good sound is something that separates, I think, kids at that age. Like, so do you think you had like an innate connection with this music, and that's where the source of the talent is, or is it just a set of circumstances of having really good teachers?
I think it's difficult to answer that about oneself.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely think, generally speaking, everyone can learn an instrument. I don't think it's just people who are talented, or whatever word you want to use. I firmly believe that everyone can learn an instrument and have a musical outlet. I think for me, there was something about the violin that I really loved, because I took piano lessons as well. And my poor piano teacher, I took maybe like 15 years of lessons, lots and lots of years of lessons. And I just hated practicing. I just didn't like the piano. It's a source of huge embarrassment for me today. I really wish I had practiced, because I would be able to do so many other creative things if I could play the piano well, arranging and all sorts of things I would love to be better at, which would be so much easier if I played the piano. But there was just something about the violin, I think, because of the vibrations that you can feel, because it's obviously under your chin and on your shoulder. You can sort of feel the instrument. You can feel the vibrations. And for me, it was a bit like singing. I really loved to sing when I was under the age of 11. And then after that, trust me, no one wants to hear me sing now, but I really loved it when I was younger. And Mrs. Hamilton really encouraged that. She actually, I think at one point, she even thought that I was going to be a singer. Because I just loved it so much, and I think that is sort of related to why I loved violin so much. It was very much sort of the same feeling for me.
I want to go back to what you said just a moment ago about when you went to Walnut Hills and having guidance that made you see that there was a place for everyone in music. And how did that inform the way you maybe approached working with others? How maybe that informed how you approached learning the instrument?
It made me work really, really hard, because I could see so many other people around me who were so much better than I was. And I spent a couple of summers at the Aspen Music Festival, and there were so many people there who were so much younger than me as well, who were so much better. And that can be quite a daunting thing. So to have a teacher in high school who's preparing me to do college auditions and conservatory auditions, keeping me really grounded in that I will have a place. Just work hard and do your best. And there is a place for everyone. So I think that just made me put everything I had into it. And then I just kind of hoped that it would work out. It would work out really.
Well, you hoped and you practiced really hard.
I hoped.
Yeah. Combined with a healthy dose of practicing. Speaking of Aspen, what did you take away from those experiences?
For me, it was amazing to meet musicians from all over the country who just played so beautifully. And I just got so much out of being there with them. I think it was really important to be around people who were so much better than I was, so that I had something to strive for. But even there, I had an amazing practice coach who would sort of go into our practice rooms and sort of help us do scales and things. And she said to me as well, sort of a similar thing that Magdalena Richter told me, because I remember being in a practice room and being very upset that I couldn't play my scales and arpeggios as in tune and as fluently as some of the younger children. Well, I guess we were children, children in my class. And she sort of she said to me that everyone moves at their own pace and to just keep going.
Interesting.
So that was quite important.
I went to Aspen for 2 summers as well, but I went my freshman and sophomore year in college. What I took away from that place, I think in retrospect, was I went to see a lot of concerts, like going to hear the Emerson Quartet play the Bartok cycle or something, just like these amazing performances. Did you have anything like that when you were there?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the concerts are the other half of the experience, I'd say, when you're there, because you can go to all of them. And so that's what you did every day. You just went to loads of concerts. And of course, those influences were so important to sort of come out of your own little, although sort of Boston area is quite a large musical hub, to be exposed to so many different concerts, so many different musicians, so many world-class musicians in one place. I was extremely lucky to be there. Feel very privileged to have had those experiences, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I think too that I don't know if I had been born in another state that I would have gone as far as I did in music, just because of how concentrated Boston is in terms of talent and great institutions and being able to see stuff. When did you get started with chamber music as a young person?
I sort of count my first chamber music experience as being in that preparatory string orchestra at GYPSO. For me, that was, and it's the same way I sort of see my job now, being in chamber orchestra. It just feels like sort of big chamber music. So I feel like that was my sort of first experience with chamber music. And then at Walnut Hill, we had a couple of chamber groups a term or semester. I can never remember how it's divided up in the States anymore. But we had a few chamber groups that we were in a year. And then when I went to the Royal Academy, you're put into a first-year quartet with other players from your year. So you're in a string quartet from the get-go. Then in my third year, I actually joined a slightly older. They were only a few years older than me, but at the time they felt much older.
At that age, it makes a difference.
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah. So I joined the Jubilee String Quartet in my third year at the Royal Academy. And I was with them for, I think, 3 years. And in that time, we were sort of fellows at the Royal Academy, and we did various competitions in the UK and one in Norway. And just those experiences of string quartet playing were just so crucial, in my opinion, to my development as a violinist. I think that there's only so much that you can learn in violin lessons, which of course, and all of that is so important, but you can only, I think, learn so much when you're in a room just with yourself, just by yourself, learning, individually. Those 3 other people in the room were so crucial, and I learned things that I would have never learned otherwise. And actually, when I got my job, I sent them a gift to say thank you, because I'm convinced I would have not got it if it hadn't been for them. So, well,
that's really interesting to hear. But let's take a quick step back. You were playing chamber music at quite a high level, though, when you were a high schooler. You were on From the Top. You're playing chamber music, and so do you attribute those experiences perhaps into your getting into college?
Absolutely. In the same way that I learned so much from my colleagues in college, I learned, so much from my friends in high school. And actually, I was in a quartet with. She's still one of my closest friends. We were in a string quartet together, and that's the string quartet that was on From the Top. And just being in a room and playing with really awesome musicians, all similar age, just brings so much to how you think about the way that you do your own practice. I remember with this same friend and a group of us, we all had the same teacher. And in the practice rooms of Walnut Hill, we would regularly go into each other's practice rooms and just play through a passage or play through something. Or often I'd actually just sit in friends' practice rooms and just watch them practice. If I thought someone practiced particularly well, I would just ask them if I could sit there and just watch them and listen to what they did and just try to apply it to my own practice.
Can you think of anything in particular that you picked up in those watching sessions?
Oh, yes. Something I still struggle with, which is to practice slowly. It's so basic, but so important. Just that attention to detail. And there's obviously so many different levels of paying attention to what you're doing. But I think I'm still working on that. I definitely still haven't got it to the point where I'm happy, but just really listen to everything that you're doing and practicing slowly.
When you say that the act of playing in a quartet influence the way you practice too, can you describe that? I mean, my sense is, and my own practicing too with chamber music, is that there's a high degree of accountability.
Well, I think as far as my actual practice, preparing everything that I do to a level that I'm happy playing it by myself. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we would often, whilst we were rehearsing, have one person play their part by themselves in a quartet rehearsal, to just have an idea of how, your own part works around that part, and making sure that because I was second violin, so making sure that moving quavers, eighth notes, or whatever we had was creating the overall shape and working with the overall idea of whatever the idea was that we had at the time.
It forces you to always think about the bigger musical picture, because certainly that's something you see with people that get stuck in the audition rabbit hole, is that you become so self-focused that it's almost you're unaware of the other parts going on around you.
I suppose actually that's the obvious thing, isn't it? I mean, I should have thought of it first, but actually listening to everything that's going on around you more than you're listening to yourself. That's probably what I took away, the biggest thing that I took away, probably from string quartet playing, to have practiced my own part enough so that I don't have to sort of be thinking all the time about what I'm doing, but being so aware of what the other three people are doing that I can react, just in that split second. And that sort of reactiveness is also what I find in my job now. Our former music director, Lars Vogt, he is just the most amazing pianist, and his concerts were so exciting because we would rehearse, obviously, and then there would just be this incredible spontaneity in the concert, and that's because everyone is just listening so much, listening to what's going on around them and reacting, and that's the beautiful thing to me about string quartet playing is how alive it is and how it can be just so different from concert to concert. It just never gets old. It never gets boring.
Yeah. My previous guest was Craig Wagner. He's an amazing jazz guitarist from Louisville, Kentucky. And he talked a lot about that in jazz. Like, you have to play with other people to practice reacting. And it's not something that you can imitate in the practice room alone. And it's something that large orchestra players, and myself included, you really can fall into a situation where you kind of go on autopilot. I think it's one of the drawbacks that you have to counteract it somehow as a large orchestra player. I'm curious though about your group. Do you think that group, the chamber orchestra, attracts a particular type of player? Like, are people that come to that orchestra there because they specifically want to play that kind of repertoire in that kind of environment?
I mean, I've only been in the orchestra for 5 years, so I can only speak for obviously my experience. And for me, I was definitely drawn to this orchestra because I was a string quartet player, because I had done a lot of chamber music, and for me, this was an opportunity to basically have a job as a chamber musician, having a full-time job and a salary. And for me, that was, I really wanted that stability as well. I really craved that stability of having a job. So for me, this was the best halfway house. So for me, yeah, definitely the repertoire attracted me to this orchestra, and the fact that chamber music is actually part of our job. So we will have patches of chamber music, which is just awesome. It's always such a treat to get to play with my colleagues in a chamber music atmosphere. And it allows us to go to perhaps smaller venues in the area as well that couldn't necessarily fit a full chamber orchestra. And it creates an opportunity for us to go there. And also, actually, we've been doing these really cool arrangements by Ian Farrington in the last few years. We did just a couple. Were Sibelius 5 and La Mer. So he did these arrangements for 12 strings or just a smaller group, basically, and it allowed us to go into much smaller venues and bring that repertoire to those places. The size of the chamber orchestra was very appealing to me as well, because I really wanted to be able to hear myself on a regular basis. And since there are only 6 of us in our section, I sort of felt like I was making a real contribution on a regular basis to the sound of the orchestra, and sort of what you were talking about before, that accountability to my section was really appealing. And also we're all just great friends. Like the orchestra, everyone is so nice and welcoming, and it's a brilliant atmosphere to be in.
So there was a period where you, before you took this job, where you were playing in a quartet as like your main artistic focus, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me about that period of your life, and tell me about the challenges and the great joys of playing in an aspiring string quartet like that.
Oh, I mean, I think it was probably the most exciting time of my life. Getting to play string quartets with 3 friends on a regular basis, I mean, every day really, was just awesome. I mean, we would rehearse all day long. In retrospect, maybe we should have had a bit more structure, or, had a few more breaks, but I think we were all just so passionate and keen for what we were doing. We just loved the repertoire so much. And we were all such great friends that it was just, like I said, just the most exciting time. We would actually rehearse in my flat in London, and we would have tea. That's the first thing. So I'd make the girls tea in the morning, and then we would just keep going from like 8 or 9 in the morning. We'd sort of stop for dinner. And I just learned so much from them. It was just amazing.
Do you think in retrospect that having a quartet that maybe isn't that close in terms of interpersonal friendships, does that create more structure for quartets? I mean, you hear about like the big groups that won't even like travel on the same airplane together, and that maybe that forces constraints your rehearsal time and maybe gives it focus. I mean, do you think that was totally an asset?
I think we were all really great friends, and we all got along really well. But I think the reason we were there from dawn till dusk is because we were all very much perfectionists as well. And we were doing competitions, and we were, applying for residencies. And like I mentioned, we were fellows at the Academy. So we were doing those auditions, and we just would rehearse until we probably overdid it now that I think about it now. But we just wanted for it to be the absolute best that we possibly could make it. So that's why we spent all that time together. I think we were working most of the time, not sort of. I think there was a good balance between sort of chat and actual work. But like I said, we were just really driven to do the best we possibly could. So
did you guys find that you had to really keep a check on the talking? I mean, I know that's something that one of the rehearsal management techniques or something that quartets talk a lot about. Is that something you guys kind of institutionalized in your playing?
Yes, I mean, definitely that is the thing, isn't it? There's always one person in the group that says, enough, stop talking, let's just play, because obviously so much of it can just be worked out by, often anyway, it can be worked out by just doing it again, less talk, more play, and work things out that way. There was always that one person, yes, who sort of brought us back to just playing and sort of get on with it. But we actually had rules. We had a set of rules that was given to us by one of our coaches, sort of quartet etiquette rules, and we just sort of checked ourselves every once in a while against those to make sure that we weren't sort of wasting time as much as we could anyway.
Was a part of those rules, obviously was not wasting time, but was it giving equal weight to all voices, in the sense like if everyone had an idea, if there were 4 different ideas, would you try it 4 different ways?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. One person is definitely not in charge in a quartet. It is definitely 4 people with 4 different points of view, and you need to obviously stay open-minded for everyone's point of view. And yeah, most of the conversations were obviously about different ideas as far as phrasings or whatever, and how closely to stick to the score, and why are we doing this? Is Is it tradition? Is it just a tradition that really should be stopped because it's not in the URTEC score? Whatever. I mean, those would be the conversations we would have, and definitely we would have those 4 points of view, and we would try them all out. We also used to do a lot of intonation practice, and we would have we had an amazing coach while we were at the academy, while we were fellows there, John Thorne, and he just gave us so many tips and tricks for quartet rehearsing, lots of which were to do with intonation practice, which were just phenomenal. But we did, the only time we had to listen, to that person was during those exercises. So if we were playing a scale in thirds, we would have one person sit in the middle of the quartet, and that person would tell each of us if we were flat or sharp or whatever, which way we needed to move. Because often it's difficult to know when you're in the middle of a string quartet. Sometimes you're going to play a note that you feel is much higher than you would normally play it on your own. And that could be the case. If you were playing it on your own, it would be sharp or whatever. But in the context of the group, it's in tune. So that was really interesting for me from an educational point of view. But yeah, that's the only time you had to really listen to that one person, was during those exercises. Otherwise, it was very equal.
Yeah. I would imagine once you start building on those foundational exercises as a group, that's maybe where you find that extra gear. Like there's no amount of playthrough of XYZ quartet that will get you guys to that level of perfection, I would think. Because that's one of my main complaints about being in a big orchestra, is that I wish we practiced together. I mean, we rehearse 6 days a week, or we rehearse and perform 6 days a week, but we don't work on fundamentals together. I mean, obviously it's much harder with 75 people than it is with 4. It is impractical, but there is an element of that is irreplaceable. Can you tell me a little bit more about your college experience? Maybe tell me about why you decided to go overseas to go to school.
I'm not an impulsive person. I like my lists, and I like my order. But I think that was the most impulsive decision I ever made, because I just thought it would be cool, if I'm really honest with you. I thought it would be an adventure. Everyone else I knew was going to American conservatories. Actually, that's not true, because I had one friend from my year tell us she came over there with me, actually, which was fantastic to have someone who I grew up with actually over there with me. It was a real comfort being so far away from home. But I think it really was the idea of, like I said, it being an adventure. And if I didn't like it, I could always come home. And maybe if I go there, because it's a new environment, I can maybe pretend to be a little better than I am. That sounds really strange. But maybe I thought I could pretend to be a little better than I was, and maybe that would be true in the end. Maybe I could improve a little faster being around people who didn't know my playing at all, who hadn't known me from sort of age 12, 13, 14. I could just be someone else, and maybe possibly improve faster. I think also what drew me to the UK was possibly the style of playing. I'm not a flashy player. I never have been. I've never been the one to play Paganini caprices perfectly. That's never been my forte. And so I just had this idea that maybe my strengths would be valued here. I think also what might have given me that idea was that I got a merit scholarship to go to the academy. So I thought I should go to the place that really wants me there.
That's really interesting. I mean, I agree with you that I think it's easy to get mired into a mindset of where you focus only on your flaws, and that it does seem to me that some folks with a higher degree of self-esteem and self-confidence actually do learn quicker. It is one of my complaints about our industry, especially as an orchestral player, where the pursuit of like almost an artificial perfection, like you're going to play this 5 minutes of music or this 10 minutes of music and like 7 different excerpts, you're going to play these things perfectly, comes with real costs though on the other side of it, which is a sort of rigidity, maybe a certain incuriosity about other musics. I'm curious then, do you think that your predictions were true? Like, do you think that you progressed quicker? And do you think that the musical culture in London was a better fit for you than it would have been had you gone to New York City, for instance?
That's interesting, and it's something that I think about a lot. I do think it was the right decision for me to move here, and definitely for what you said before about the sort of artificial perfection and sort of rigidity that comes with that is totally true. I had this great teacher when I was doing my I went through a period after I left my quartet when I decided that I wanted a job, of doing so many auditions and being a total perfectionist. I would practice an embarrassing number of hours a day. It was not productive, but I needed to play everything perfect, whatever that meant. Hundreds of times, or dozens of times in a day for me to be satisfied, so that I knew that I had given everything to every audition, which was totally unsustainable. My first few auditions were the best ones that I did, and then after that, they increasingly got worse, because it's impossible to keep up practicing that many hours, and for it to not have its costs. But I did have this amazing coach whilst I was preparing for those, that said, you can practice as long as you want, but you have to do it completely relaxed. And that is something I never did. None of my playing, I've always sort of struggled with tension, and I don't know, it was that piece of advice, which of course I'd got dozens of times throughout my life, but I feel like sometimes you have to hear the right thing at the right time to sort of take it on and apply it to what you're doing. So that was just the right advice at the right time. And that helped hugely with that. I think moving to the UK, yeah, like I said, for me was definitely the right move. I'm very sensitive, and I think possibly the competitiveness that I could have experienced other places might have made me decide not to go into music. I don't know that for sure, obviously, because I chose the path that I chose. But my experiences at the Royal Academy of Music, and actually at the Royal College of Music, where I did my master's, were just exactly what I needed at that time. I can remember my teacher when I was doing my master's. I used to go into the lessons, and it was at the time when I think I had just left, or no, I was in my quartet for the first year of my master's, and then my second year I was going for auditions for orchestral jobs. So it was a huge transition point for me, and quite stressful. I cry quite a lot now over everything. A good film, whatever. I cry, but I never did before. And so a couple of lessons, I went in just sort of bawling, and because of the amount of stress that I was putting on myself. And he would be so positive with me, and just say, you're not allowed to say anything bad about yourself, and you're not allowed to be negative about anything that you're doing. You just basically have to do your best. Just try your best. And that quite nurturing environment was just exactly what I needed. And I don't know if that's to do with going to school over here, but that was just the particular teachers that I was in contact with, and it was just exactly what I needed.
Yeah, I think you can find those of us that got the right teacher, especially in undergrad, I think it's irreplaceable. I mean, I certainly made a conscious choice about where I went to school and with whom I studied, but in retrospect, I still hit the lottery. In that he was the right balance of encouragement, great technical analysis, and what deficits there were. Certainly, his strength wasn't orchestral literature, and it was easy enough to find that outside of school with players in the local orchestra.
My first teacher when I went to the academy was actually Lydia Markovich, and later on I had two teachers while I was there, Lydia Markovich and Ramos Azoite. Both absolutely wonderful teachers. Like I said, I had a really great, I hit the lottery, as you said, with teachers at the academy. But in my first week at the academy, having this sort of culture shock of moving abroad and being a little bit unsure, in a new environment and all the rest of it, really, walked into my first lesson with Lydia Markovich, who was such a powerhouse, such a character. And the first thing she assigned me was Brahms Violin Concerto. And I immediately told her, I can't do that. She said, yes, you can. You will do this. And she used to play the piano along in your lessons. And it was it was such an experience. She would play the piano so loudly and just more sound. It was just this type of out of the box, just so different to what I had experienced before. It was just it sort of shook me in the best way possible.
Yeah. So being steeped in that style of big, like Russian soloistic playing of late 19th century, early 20th century repertoire, did that leave a big impact on your playing, or was it just like a phase? Like, what did you learn from her tutelage?
Well, I think I've always loved that repertoire. It's always been my favorite stuff to play. I don't think that I naturally have the most giant sound, but I love that repertoire. And she definitely brought out. She helped me with sound production. She helped me with intonation. I mean, that was something she was very, very fussy about. Greatly. I'm so grateful for that. Sound production and intonation. And she was just so nurturing and very motherly in her teaching. So I used to go to her house actually in St. Albans, which is maybe an hour or so outside of London, and I would just stay there for sort of 6-hour lessons, and she'd feed me, and you were there for the day to learn from her, and it was fantastic.
So going back to the auditions then, after having this long sequence of high pressure auditions that were kind of diminishing returns, it sounds like you were saying, do you feel that your audition for your current position, you had worked those things out?
No, because this was I think the second, maybe first, second, third, something like that audition that I did.
Okay.
So this was very much one of the first auditions that I ever did, was for my job now.
Okay, so it was one of the first ones you did, and you mentioned how maybe you started to put in more time and having worse results. So you feel that audition that went well, obviously the outcome was one you wanted, and
it took a long time it took a while to get that result, to sort of to know that it had gone well, really, because of the way that one gets a job here. So I think it's a little different than in the States, although I'm not totally sure. But over here, so I did the audition, which was one of the first ones I did, and then I was on trial with that orchestra for 1.5 years, and then at the end, I was lucky enough to get the job. But in the meantime, I think, for instance, like, we don't have tenure over here or anything like that. We have sort of a trial period, and then once you get the job, I think I had 3 months probation. I think now it might be 6, but you have like a probationary period. It's very unlikely that will end badly because you've already had such a long trial process before that. So in the meantime, I was still living in London. I was finishing my master's, if I remember, for the first part of it, and then I graduated, and then sort of did another sort of year-ish of trial with them, whilst being on trial with a couple of other orchestras.
I see. Yeah, we have the probationary period lasts until you get tenure, and so it's usually between a year and 2 years of where you can be let go for any reason. Earlier in my career, I saw people not getting tenure, so I took the process quite seriously from the beginning. When I first started working in a full-time orchestra, I was only a little bit out of school, and I remember what I thought I wasn't really prepared for was the quantity of music that we were going through. What was the transition like for you going from a string quartet to a full-time orchestra job? Did you have a kind of a growing pains in that at all?
Yeah, so that's a good point, really, because it was something that I worried about, because obviously with string quartet playing, you spend a lot of time on the same repertoire. And I was looking at different orchestras. So the London orchestras tend to go through more repertoire as well, and the bigger orchestras, I was seeing the bigger orchestras go through programs a week, a program in a day. So you have rehearsal on the day and a concert. And British musicians are incredible sight readers. They're absolutely amazing at it. And that's never really been a strong suit for me. So I was really worried that I was going to go into the freelance world at that point. I was going to go into the freelance world and not be able to keep up. so there definitely were a few growing pains in that way, for sure. But I think the job that I have now is sort of a happy medium, because we have the very luxurious sort of 2 days of rehearsal and then a concert. So we have enough time I have enough time to really learn each program, and then the rehearsal process to sort of learn it together, if you will, and then a concert at the end. So it doesn't feel too stressful. It did definitely at the beginning when I was getting used to it, but now I've sort of got used to it.
Is that 4 rehearsals over 2 days? We usually do it Tuesday morning, double on Wednesday, Thursday morning, and then sometimes we do a Thursday night concert.
I see. No, so it's 2 days of 6 hours, and then a 3-hour dress and concert on the third day.
Gotcha. And how many concerts a week do you usually play? How many times do you repeat the program?
Well, this is something that we hopefully will do more of. But generally, we would do 2 rehearsals and a concert, and then maybe repeat that program somewhere else in the region, or do an educational concert on the Saturday. But I would say probably 2-3 programs a week, something like that. Not always going with that structure of 2 days of rehearsal, but I would say generally 2-3 programs a week, depending.
And so is it a part of your guys' mandate then that you do play in like suburban areas, or so getting out of the city center?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of what we do, as well as giving concerts at our home, which is Sage Gateshead in our concert hall. We definitely do go out into the region and travel around, both in chamber music formations and as a full orchestra. We, in the last few years, obviously not this year because of COVID, but in the last few years, we've been doing these Christmas Baroque concerts, which have been really, really lovely. They break us into 2 different orchestras, basically. And we go around maybe 5 or 6 different venues each in the region, which is really nice to go and bring those programs to different areas around, because as I said, we're the only orchestra in the region. So definitely this region's orchestra.
And what kind of educational role does it fulfill?
At Sage Gateshead, there is an educational department. So a really brilliant one. I actually teach there on a Sunday. So as an orchestra, we do sort of programs for schools to come maybe on a Saturday, and we'll have someone present the program that we've done during the week, or we'll go into schools in the region and do projects with them. But yeah, as I say, there's actually an educational hub at Sage Gateshead.
When you say do educational programs with them, sorry, are you teaming up with local teachers, or are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, brilliant local music teachers, and we will either be there as just sort of an extra bit, as a sort of support, or whatever they sort of need in their class, or we'll go in and sort of we'll have a project leader and we'll write perhaps a piece with them and sort of present it at the end, whether that be a visual score or working on something maybe that they've already been working on that term or something like that. But yeah, generally that would be sort of a quartet or something that would go into a school and do that sort of project. So
you're saying you go in and you compose a piece of music with the kids? Yeah,
sometimes. It could be that sort of project, or it could be us just going and playing really, and then answering questions. So lots of different formats. It just would depend on that project.
Do you find that these programs are like good for the morale of the orchestra? I mean, it feels like it's probably providing a good service for your community. Do you feel like that feeds back into the players' stamina and commitment?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think everyone's really, really keen to do those kinds of projects. I think we would love to do even more of it. Mm-hmm. I think you can always do more. But yeah, it's really, really important for us not to just sort of be in our concert hall and do what we do, but to actually be part of the community.
Tell me about your orchestra's activities during the health crisis. How have you guys been staying active during this time?
We did do one outdoor concert in the summer, which was really lovely. We did a concert for our donors in an outdoor space, which was great. Other than that, we've done a 7-week series at Sage Gateshead, which has been really fun for us and great for our audience, great to see them again, and just great to be back in the hall making music together. It was really quite emotional when we first started back, and also the new sort of setup being socially distanced from each other. So we all have our own stand and we're all 2 meters apart. Sort of getting used to that. But I think just the joy of being back in the hall and making some music just was more important than maybe the initial feeling of being slightly uncomfortable being so far away from each other. But we did have a 7-week long concert series, which started out with some live audience, which is really fantastic. But unfortunately then our tier changed in the Northeast and we weren't allowed to have them anymore. And so we switched to streaming concerts. But it was still great to be doing that and to see our audience again.
When you did have the in-house audience, were you guys also streaming? Was it a hybrid?
Yes, we were actually. So it was great from sort of self point of view. My family could perform for the first time without actually having to come and visit me over here. They could watch in the comfort of their own home on their sofa, which was great.
Do you think that you guys will continue with the technology once we're back to giving live concerts? I mean, do you think this will become a permanent part of the way you guys distribute your music?
Yes, I think it probably will. I think it's definitely something that there needs to be more of, just more content to get out there. But yes, I think it's here to stay.
Mm-hmm. Have you felt like you've learned anything? I mean, I know from my own group, getting the chance to watch the performances has given me a better sense of, some of the, my own leadership deficiencies and some of the things I'd like to do better. Watching myself as a principal, I would do something differently. So it's been very personally helpful to me, but also getting a sense of the orchestra. Of course, are you guys able to play with your full complement?
No, actually, we all fit on the stage, being socially distanced. So yes, we can all be there, which is really great.
Okay, so you're all there. That's helpful. Do you feel like it's going to improve the artistic product over time, though, getting to hear the group, even though it's under imperfect circumstances?
I mean, definitely. Even as you said, from a personal point of view, it's always helpful to record yourself, even in practice room setting, to record yourself and listen back. So yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be really beneficial. I mean, I've definitely learned some things about myself and sort of the things I would like to improve by watching these concerts. So yeah, they've definitely been helpful.
Do you think that going forward, post vaccination, there will be an impact on your guys' programming? I mean, are there conversations about how the events of the past year might change or influence the artistic focus of the group in terms of programming specifically?
Definitely. And I already feel like there has been a change there in absolutely the right direction. There needs to be more music from minority groups being performed and being played and being known. Mm-hmm. And hopefully after a certain point, it won't be necessary to describe it in that way. It will just be part of our repertoire that is played on a regular basis and enjoyed on a regular basis. But definitely I feel that shift, that much needed shift already.
How else do you think the job might be different when you come back?
Perhaps more individual involvement. As I said, we've been asked to come up with projects that we would like to lead on, and perhaps just a more individual voice for each of us to be more creative in ways that we want to be. Perhaps it will be different in that way. I mean, I'm hoping a lot of it will be the same. I'm hoping we'll go back to full concert halls and performing live music to a full room. So I'm hoping not a huge amount will change. But I think, as I see it moving forward with our group, perhaps more creativity on an individual level.
Do you anticipate that when it's reasonably safe that there will be, and this I'm asking you about just broader society and not necessarily your individual institution and your community, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the demand, how quickly demand will come back for large events. I think
we'll definitely come back very quickly. I think people are desperate for live music. I don't think it can be replaced with a record in your house. I think that electricity of live music for a live event is irreplaceable. So I think as soon as we're able to have those live events, I think people will come. I don't think that'll be a problem. Live music is necessary for our soul, for our well-being in so many ways. And I think people are really just keen and a bit desperate to get back to it. So I don't think that will be affected.
Well, and I think this is probably a pretty good place to wrap up. Do you have any recommendations on things to check out, books, music, something like that?
Well, I think as far as a film recommendation that I quite enjoyed over the lockdown is Metropolis. It's a silent film from 1927. It's like a German sci-fi drama.
Okay.
It's really excellent. Yeah.
What's the music like?
The music is by Gottfried Huberts. And it sort of reminds me a bit of Strauss and Wagner sort of style. And it's really fantastic, and the storyline's really great. I feel like it's quite ahead of its time. So I really enjoyed that, so I recommend that.
The Rochester Philharmonic began its career as a silent movie orchestra.
Oh, really?
Rochester's like the home of film, basically, the Eastman Kodak company up here. And so George Eastman, when he founded the orchestra, its primary purpose was to play along with silent films.
Oh, cool. Awesome. I wonder if they did Metropolis.
Okay. I'll dig into the archives to see if I can find it.
I think a book recommendation, one that I just found really important and fascinating was it's a book called Natives by Akala. He's a British author and a rapper and activist. And I just found it really powerful insight into racism, into his experience of racism growing up in the UK, something I didn't know very much about at all. And I just felt was a really good, really important read.
Alanna, thank you for making time. It was great to catch up with you and hear about your career.
Thank you. It was so nice to speak to you.
Thank you for listening. The music on the show, as always, is by my previous guest, Craig Wagner, a guitarist from Louisville, Kentucky. The next episode will feature Dr. Lisa Brooks, the Dean of the Jordan College of Arts at Butler University in Indianapolis, Indiana, and she is a violinist and violist as well. So that will be out later this month. So please go ahead and hit subscribe.